What's that number one misconception you hear when people are thinking about building a business, making money, changing their financial situation? Yeah. What's the number one thing you hear and you go, that's the issue?
I think they conflate sequence is probably the first and biggest thing, because a lot of people who are wanting to make money believe that the making money comes from investing, and investing is the last thing you do, not the first thing you do. And so one of the things is they'll look at people who are at the end of their careers and say, okay, well, these guys are making all these, these bets, right? If I just bought this meme coin, or I just bought Bitcoin in 2013, I'd be super rich. But it actually doesn't take into consideration what a decision-making process like that would create. I would say making active income cool again, rather than the passive bet and really just gambling, is probably the first thing that people mess up, is that they somehow think that working or active income is not scalable, when in reality, the people who have the most money typically have tremendously high incomes. And it's because of the excess of cash flow from that income are they able now to make big swings with riskier bets that sometimes pay off and sometimes don't. But you can't take those swings unless you have more cash flow that's coming in from the things you do every day. We live in time, and we collect money in that period of time. And so fundamentally, all we want to do if we want to increase our income is just think, what are we earning per unit? And this is where, again, bad piece of advice is like, never sell your time. It's like, okay, well, if someone gave you $1 billion for an hour, would you not sell that? I would. Right? And so it's a question of how much is your time worth? And then that creates a much more actionable decision-making framework of, is this worth it or not? How active is it versus how passive is it? And it's my belief that nothing is passive. There's always going to be a certain amount of, if you're doing it right, let's say if you made one passive investment, if you're doing it the right way, you probably should have looked at 100 deals, and all of that took time. And all of that takes diligence. And then after doing all this analysis, then you decide to make this investment. And so to say that it's passive, it's like it doesn't take into account all of the research that goes into ahead of time, which is absolutely still work. Now, after the investment, sure, but there's still time that you're trading. By first breaking that idea of like, in order for me to get rich, it must be something that I don't trade my time for, I think is like big myth number one. So if we assume that, then we say, okay, I have to trade my time for money because money comes in over time. What are the things that I can trade my time for that will get me more than I'm currently getting? Especially when you're trading time, we have some. It's a voluntary exchange. And here's the thing is, if you don't think the price is worth it, then don't make the trade. And that's one of the beauties of capitalism. And I would say that what's interesting is that you can build something very big in about 5 to 7 years. And the problem is that I think most people spend that same 5 to 7 years reliving the same 30 days over and over again, jumping from thing to thing to thing, and never actually getting the root set so that they can pay down their ignorance tax of not knowing enough. Basically, I would say there's 5 stages that most newer entrepreneurs or people who want to pursue income go through. So the first is what I call uninformed optimism. So your friend tells you about this thing they made 10 grand on, and you're like, that sounds amazing. You're uninformed, but you're optimistic, right? And so then you get into it, and then all of a sudden you get to informed pessimism. So you get in, and then you put your money in, and then it drops, and you're like, wow, this sucks. And then, people are like, buy the dip. And so you're like, okay, I'm gonna put more money in. And so then you get to kind of stage 3, which is the valley of despair, where you're like, oh my God, I've lost so much money. I have no idea what's going on right now. And at stage 3, there's kind of a fork. And so either people then go, well, my other friend told me about this other thing, and they jump back to step 1 and go to uninformed optimism. And then they funnel through that loop over and over again. To break through that dip, you have to basically get to stage 4, which is informed optimism. So now you understand the rules of the game, you understand the variables at play, and it's not as good as you thought it was, but you at least get it. And so from there, then you can get to achievement, which is the 5th step. But the thing is that you have to stay in that 3rd painful place, because staying in the pain is what gives you the catalyst to learn how to get out of pain. It's like, I have to trudge through this so that it forces me to learn the individual skills, the individual variables that affect this outcome. And that means I might have to take 20 more lashings to finally get it. And then at that point, it starts to tick up. Yeah. And then that's when you start to become more of an expert, more of a master at something.
Yeah, and if you don't sit in that pain, you're going to keep repeating that cycle with something new. So it was crypto, then it was NFTs, then it was whatever else, just keeps going round and round and round. Is that system in this new book?
So this is probably for one chunk above that.
I love the way you break down the journey that we go through in our mind. Yeah. And you do that with multiple things, because I think we don't even see it.
No.
Like that pattern you just explained is a pattern you could live for 3 decades. You've just saved people 3 decades of pain by pointing it out. People make the mistake where we go, I don't have time to learn.
Right.
So I'm going to learn from someone who makes me feel like I can learn it in an hour.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do it, which still is uninformed optimism. how do you build that time to say, how many hours do I need to even learn about this? I'm going to put money in it. How would you calculate that? If someone was like, I'm going to put in $1,000, I'm going to put in a $10,000. How much time should they put to value that amount of money?
Great question. I would reframe the premise, which would be we'd still be operating under this as I'm going to put money into something. And so I would reject the original premise and say, well, if you want to get really good at something, then why don't we start with skills that generate income? Yeah. And so if we follow kind of the three elements of a business at its most basic form is you have some element of promotion. So we got to let people know about our stuff. The second element is we got to have a way to convert them, some sort of exchange mechanism. And then finally we have to deliver, right? So attract, convert, deliver. Within each of those things, it's like, okay, well, how do I let people know about my stuff? Or even before that, what stuff do I sell? That's where I like to think about it as people trying to think, man, there's so many people and try to boil the ocean. Like it's impossible to try and think what business could I possibly start because you're trying to address the world. When it's much easier to say, what are the problems that exist in my life? Think about it as the 3 Ps. Like most businesses come out of a passion. They come out of a profession. So you currently exchange, right now you have a job, whatever it is, and you get paid for exchanging some sort of value with the business. And the third is P, which is pain, right? So there's some deep pain that sometimes you went through. So maybe it's a mom who had to figure out how to create non-allergenic food for their kids, right? It'd be something as small as that. And so from those 3 kind of buckets is, I think, the best starting point for most people who want to start making an income. It's like, okay, well, if you're inherently interested in this topic, it's like, can we let people know about stuff around that topic? Can we create solutions around that stuff? Can we create services, which is where I prefer most people start, which to be fair, in the United States, 78% of businesses are service-based businesses. And I think it's because they're the easiest to start. You just trade time for money. Very low risk, right? You either get richer or you don't, but like your base is zero.
Subscribe to my channel.